Welcome, everybody. I'm Professor Daniel Sokol from USC Marshall School of Business and Gould School of Law, and it's my great pleasure to host another one of our webinars. This one, very timely because there's been an election in Korea which has potentially profound changes in store for Korean competition policy. What this means at this early stage may be unclear, but we still have some broad themes where we already have a sense of what the new presidency may mean in this space. And because this is our Marshall Initiative on Digital Competition, the digital space is a particularly important one. So I'm thrilled to have four of the truly great Korean competition practitioners who will work us through exactly what may or may not be at stake. And I'll let each of them introduce themselves, a little bit of background, and then we'll jump into questions. Hyuna, why don't I start with you?
Okay, thank you, Danny. I'm Hyuna Kim, antitrust partner at Bae Kim and Lee. I started my practice back in 2000 and spent more than 25 years in this field. I cover every issues of antitrust law, from merger filing, investigation and litigation and compliance work. And our antitrust practice group consists of 70 professionals dedicated to antitrust work, which includes in-house economic analysis team. It's very nice to meet you all.
Great. Thank you, Hyuna. Just going down the list, Cecil?
Yes, sir. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cecil Saehoon Chung. I'm the head of international antitrust at Yulchon law firm in Seoul, Korea. Hopefully, I'll have something interesting and useful to contribute today. I have something of a unique background because I actually started my career as a litigation attorney at the U.S. Federal Trade Commission. I was there for 7 years, and then I was also with two big U.S. law firms, Greenberg Traurig, and before that, Pillsbury Winthrop as an antitrust partner. So I hope to bring something useful to this conversation with my extensive experience as having been an enforcer and defense lawyer in the U.S. as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Youngjin.
No, thank you for inviting me to this wonderful panel, Danny. I'm an antitrust partner at Kim Jung. I'm co-heading our antitrust practice group. I have been in this space for a long time. Hopefully, I can contribute a little bit to this wonderful discussion. It's very nice to meet you.
John?
Thank you, Danny. Thrilled to see everyone here, all the familiar faces that we meet all the time. My name is Choi. I had Shin and Kim's antitrust group. We are involved in all, I guess, wide range of cases. And I hope to contribute something interesting today. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Now that we've all introduced each other, I'll ask a series of questions to all of you, and we'll sort of go one by one, build off of each other's insights, and hopefully, as you all said, we'll learn something together. So I guess the first question is, for those listening in who are less familiar with Korea, there was an election. What does this mean generally? And maybe if you can give us an overview of the last few years of competition policy. John, since we just ended with you, I thought maybe it would make sense to start with you. Give us a bit of flavor for what's the context here.
Right. I think for those who do not know why this election happened in Korea, it happened because of an impeachment of the previous president who had declared martial law, which led to his impeachment. I guess one interesting sort of aspect of this election is that because this was an election that was triggered by impeachment, the new president took office immediately following the certification of the election results, which happened within about a day after the election itself. I think from a macro perspective, right, the biggest change is that both the National Assembly and the President's office is now controlled by one party. The ruling party has the control close to a supermajority, not a clear supermajority, but close to a supermajority in the legislative branch. And they also now control the President's office. I think that then leads to the next question as to how the speed at which they can pass new laws in Korea because of this change. In the past, the president had exercised his veto power over the laws that were passed by the legislative branch. Now that the legislative branch and the president's office is controlled by the same party, I think the expectation is that some of the laws will pass on an expedited basis or a faster time track than in the past. But I think having said that, I think there is some still limitations because of the ways the law or a bill is presented to the plenary session of the National Assembly, particularly with respect to laws related to KFTC. Before the law is presented to the plenary session of the National Assembly in Korea, the law must go through a review by the committees within the National Assembly. The committee responsible for KFTC-related law is NPC. The chairperson of that NPC is controlled by the opposition party now, which was formerly the ruling party. As he controls the agenda that is discussed within that committee, I think there may still be some slowdown of the laws related to KFTC, such as the Korean DMA, the Online Platform Act, may not pass as quickly as people may think it would, right? Because there is still some roadblocks there. Some of the other issues that are being discussed within the KFTC is that during the previous administration, the enforcement unit or the working part of the KFTC was divided into the enforcement unit and the policy unit. They're talking about remerging that into one unit again, like in the past, because some of the efficiencies that they thought about did not sort of really materialize. I think from a sort of the enforcement perspective, I think there is some expectation that the traditional antitrust enforcement will increase as time passes. There was some market decrease in the sort of traditional antitrust investigations that we used to see during the previous administration, largely because of their sort of attempt to foster self-regulation. And then there was these sort of the other investigations that had sort of social issues in Korea, which the after-school education, like the Hagwon investigations and the bank investigations, that were really sort of triggered by the president's office. So I think that's sort of my take on the impact of this election.
This is all really wonderful as a way to get us started. So there are a few things I want to tease out that maybe I can get some commentary from the rest of you. The first is sort of a structural one. How much power is the president going to have in terms of shaping competition policy? What are the pressure points? Maybe we could just start there, and then maybe after that, we could go into these questions of what exactly were cases in the last administration, just to get an overview, traditional ones and tech cases and some of these social cases, just to get a flavor so that when we talk about the future, we understand the overall trajectory of what has happened in Korea to better put into perspective what we think may happen. So I don't know who wants to jump in, maybe with the sort of the bigger questions of how does the larger political structure play out? President versus legislature. Are we likely to see movement quickly or less so? Anybody have some thoughts on this? Youngjin, maybe I'll start with you.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. John, you really laid out, what are the implications of this change of administrations? Certainly, this is a progressive government, a left-wing government. Certainly, break away from the previous administration. Like I said, during the previous administration, they didn't really initiate a lot of new, policies and enforcement priorities. It's more of continuation of the previous administration, especially because of the bifurcation of, as you correctly explained, the bifurcation of the investigative unit and the policy unit, because of the lack of resources to really launch a larger scale investigation. So, during the previous administration, we haven't seen, many larger scale investigations. And of course, there are usual suspects that have been investigated, but we haven't seen, compared with what it used to be, we haven't seen a lot of new cases touching upon the really structure of the Korean competitive landscape. They touched upon things like the consumer protection related issues on the platform, using KFTC's enforcement tool under e-commerce act, for instance. There are many cases we haven't seen such an uptick in enforcement of e-commerce legislations. So that is something that we've seen. On the looking forward during this new administration, one of the things I've noticed, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my observation. If you look at the new administration's presidential campaign platform, then it laid out three visions. One is recovery, and the growth and happiness. These are the three visions, right? Under the three visions, if you look at the growth pillar of these three visions, there is a actual strategies under this campaign platform, which is fair economy. So the this new administration, while it is a progressive government, but interestingly enough, it is emphasizing the growth, economic growth, right? So this is a bit different orientations we've seen during a progressive government, but at the same time, it emphasizes a fair growth, prosperity between haves and have-nots, and emphasizing fair economy, ecosystem. So, I take it as a while you're pursuing economic growth, innovation-based economy, but this administration recognizes it's very important to make sure that you need to provide a economic foundation where anti-competitive and sort of the things that are not on level playing field, that should be corrected so that you can achieve a new industrial policy, which is innovation-driven growth and strategies. So some people may think that while this new administration emphasizing economic growth, pragmatism, this is a progressive government. At the same time, they're focusing heavily on fair growth. So I don't think that this administration, will sort of, place less emphasis on antitrust enforcement and competition policy. I'll stop here. Maybe Cecil, you can jump in.
Sure, sure. Youngjin, those are all excellent points and interesting ones too. My own personal take, just purely my personal view, is that I think regardless of who's in power, we'll have certain amount of antitrust enforcement. Right? I mean, it's the same whether it's in here or in the States. And as you know, in the States, we have something of a similar situation that the Republicans now controls both the House and Senate and the White House, obviously. And the in any system, when a president says something, that does carry a significant weight, and the people underneath will bend over backward to make sure they do something, so that at least the next time there is a hearing, they can come up with a response as to what they've been doing in response to that recommendation or comment. That happens in Korea too, of course. In the last administration, we know the rumor has it that there are a number of investigations were really prompted by the former President Yoon's comments more than anything else. but perhaps it's useful to see what will stay the same, what will not change, and then talk a little bit about what may change as bring out my crystal ball, but I see that it's very opaque. So probably it has no predictive value, but be that as may, let's start. Number one, what will not change no matter who's in power? The cartel enforcement, that will stay the same, assuming they can actually find some cartel violations. I suppose by now the cartels are universally condemned, and basically, if you do it, there will be some sort of a punishment. What happens to you, whether it's just an administrative fine or the jail time, that's a different story. But the offenders get no sympathy, regardless of whether the ruling party is more of a conservative one or the progressive one. Now, what we've seen here in Korea and also in other countries is that we haven't seen really truly international cartels, big ones like the auto parts, some of the financial the derivatives product indexes products like that for some time. In the U.S., obviously they are trying something new. We're trying to bring a criminal no poaching case of labor, to getting into the labor area and other areas. But here in Korea, you will still see the run-of-the-mill cartel types cases, because some industries are prone to, or susceptible to, or maybe by the definition, we need to rethink about what to do with some of those industries. But that's not for the topic is important, but maybe not for this call. The construction industry, for example, whether in Korea or anywhere in the world, the structure is such that it's more susceptible to cartel allegations. And the usual supply of milk supply to school district and those little things. There will be always some local, the cartel matters. That the KFTs will continue to find and go after that. That's not going to change. Merger case, I think, despite the fact that the new government has announced that they are going to look at revisit the alternative value of the deal, filing thresholds again, since it doesn't seem to be working. But then again, no one said it was going to work. Just looking at the experience in Austria and Germany too, so maybe there will be some tinkering on that too. But I think there will continue to be a fairly strong, rigorous merger enforcement in Korea, both looking at domestic deals and global deals with Korean implications. If you look at the recent merger enforcement history in this past 10 plus years, all these global deals with the global fixes that the parties offered and be accepted by the US and the European regulators didn't get a free pass. The Youngjin and Chung and everybody, you all have your personal experience in handling those. The KFTC always wanted to say thank you very much that you have offered to fix this from a global perspective, but we are here in Korea. our mandate to look at each transaction to see whether it's going to have any effect that's unique to Koreans and Korean market. And on a number of cases we can readily think of, the KFTC managed to add some extra conditions. Surely they didn't kill the deal, but there were some extra conditions, approval conditions attached to many of those deals. So I think the parties and they understand, and the M&A lawyers too, that when they have a deal in Korea, they may need to actually look at Korean issues and be prepared to offer and accept something extra. So that, I think, happened even under the progressive government and the conservative government. So that will continue to happen with some tweaking. But then what is that? And then Korea's unique system of going after unfair trade practices that falls short of abuse of dominance. The kind of the power that the former US FTC chairman Lina Khan would have loved to have, that the power to really use the Section 5 of the FTC Act as broadly as possible. The KFTC already has it, and they use it. They use it more extensive than, say, many other countries, I think. And that will continue to be the case. And I think the new government, the spokesperson and the ruling parties, the congressman mentioned that the unfair trade practice is one thing, and abuse of dominance, they're related but are different, because the idea is that the biggest difference is this: in the U.S., if the offender doesn't have market power, it's not abusing its position, then there will be a kind of a black hole of some sort. But here in Korea, in that case, we can still go after, the KFTC still goes after situations where one party to a transaction is flexing its muscles too hard and abusing its superior bargaining position to hurt the other side, who's known as in a economically disadvantaged situation. So it's culturally and structurally and system-wise, it is the KFTC already has it. They can go after it. They will continue to do that. Then what's the difference? The biggest difference I see is the increased possibility of having some sort of ex-ante investigation, the regulation on the digital platform. That's been going on for some time, but now, globally speaking, that the eagerness to have a separate rules, especially ex-ante regulation, has I wouldn't say died down, has decreased somewhat. I'm sure at least partially because the aftermath of the DMA, the experience in Europe, where it's not as clear cut, and I'm sure there are the opponents will say, look at what's happening. Actually, the cure may not be that much better than the disease itself, because it creates a whole bunch of issues, whether it's philosophically correct or not. But I do think there is an increased possibility of having some sort of a bill passed. Now the ruling party is talking about having two-track legislative approach, so that maybe they will try to pass the easier ones first. But there will be some sort of efforts, more increased efforts. Whether it's going to carry the day, that's a different story. But I think we are going to look at that efforts a bit longer than, say, in the previous government, where they basically said, no, we'll do more of a soft-end approach, or that the existing FTA is sufficient to go after. And each side, the proponents and opponents of ex-ante regulation can point to examples. In the U.S., especially today, they will say, see, we don't have a specialized separate ex-ante regulation, but the good old Sherman Act is good enough. Look at all these cases DOJ and the state governments are bringing against the Googles. There are a number of them, the Apples, Amazon, Meta, and we have we have everything we need to go after those big companies. Now, the Europe, maybe is to be fair to them, and maybe in a bit different situation.
We'll get more
Jurisdiction.
into
Yes.
the sort of the DMA-like stuff in just a bit. I guess the big question is how much is sort of coming from this past administration where, again, there was some push for regulation that didn't seem to ultimately go anywhere. Or the people who were pushing for it before pushing for it now?
Right. I think, I think I'm taking too much time. So let me just give a very brief answer. I think there's a big difference. And there's a good point, Dan. In the previous governments, the people who were in power didn't seem to have the desire or interest or consensus to really carry through and have ex-ante regulation of sort. Because I think philosophically they were definitely on a different mold than others. But the new ruling party, and I think they genuinely think this is a good idea, and there's a higher chance because there seems to be a better consensus among them as to what the proper approach should be. More interventionist, if you say, or more paternalist, or more European Union style. We have rules first and then do it. One comment on that. In Korea, as some people know, whereas most of the people outside Korea don't know, Korea also already has, and the KFTC administers some sort of a ex-ante designation system for large conglomerate groups. Today, they have about 92 groups designated as a large conglomerates, and where the whole bunch of reporting requirements, like the public company in the US type, and then a smaller set of some 30 companies with extra restraint or restrictions on cross-holding and kind of things they can do. So they like that idea. I think it's the concept of designating a certain group of people as a suspect or watch out for a category and pay extra attention. Because the KFTC has a designated unit within its organization that spends a lot of time doing that. So should they have a DMA-like regime? Say we're used to running this kind of a pre-designation and then making sure they actually listen to me, that concept, versus in the US where the concept is foreign to them more or less. So that may be another reason. And what is really different is the ruling party's desire, the philosophical approach to this whole issue. I think they genuinely believe that the approach like the ex-ante regulation is better and necessary.
Yes, no, Danny, I'm tempted to make some observation about what Sejong had to say, but
Sure.
Hyuna has a wealth of wisdom.
Yes, I was going to get to her first, and then
Right.
sort of
I'll
go back.
defend Hyuna.
Yes.
Thank you. Before going into the discussion on this DMA style ex-ante regulation, I'd like to slightly touch upon some criminal cartel enforcement issue as well, because under the previous administration, we saw a lot of active participation by the prosecutor's office because they introduced their own leniency program and initiated their own investigation ahead of the KFTC's investigation. And we saw the result of the prosecutor's office result ahead of the KFTC decision. But there may be some change in this field as well, because there's a discussion on how to shape the scope of the prosecutor's office's investigation power. So there may be a decrease in the scope of the investigation power by the prosecutor's office. So there may be some change in the active enforcement by the prosecutor's office, but we will see how it will unfold in the near future. And going back to the issue of ex-ante regulation, there are still two pending bills at the National Assembly level, which is ex-ante regulation DMA style, which is led by one representative under the ruling Democratic Party, which is Namgun Kim. He's said to be one of the candidates for the next chairperson of the KFTC, and he's a strong believer of the ex-ante regulation. And at the same time, the bill amending the existing competition law was proposed by the KFTC and proposed by the Conservative Party, which is basically exposed presumption of dominance, which includes not only the dominant position, but also the abuse itself. So you also understand there are 4 specific types of conducts that focused by this bill, namely tying, self-preferencing, and demanding most favored nations clause and restricting multi-homing. So those 2 bills are still pending at the National Assembly level. And as John correctly mentioned, the National Committee at the National Assembly plenary session, which is National Policy Committee, is still led by the opposing party, the Conservative Party, who is pro post-presumption types of amending the existing law. So there are conflicting 2 bills at the National Policy Committee level. And there is a saying, the Representative Namgun Kim, who is leading the ex-ante regulation types of bill, he's proposing the fast-track approach to these 2 pending bills, which means there is a specific time limits for discussion at the National Policy Committee as well as the National Plenary Session of the National Assembly. So once the specific time limit passes, then the bill automatically will be submitted for voting at the National Assembly's plenary session. So there's a still chance, but I suspect our ruling party does not have sufficient seats to go to that fast track procedure. So we'll see the result in the near future. But so still, to me, it is very unclear whether we go to this ex-ante regulation route or the ex-post amending the existing law route or not. So, but according to the press media coverage, last Friday we had this Presidential National Policy Planning Committee meeting where the KFTC reported its operational plans to the president. And one of the key agenda items was the plan for building a fair platform ecosystem. So surely they will focus on these issues at the next assembly session. So we'll soon see the result. But I think there is a way to compromise these 2 different bills into one. So it doesn't have to be the ex-ante regulation or having ex-ante designation of the dominant players. But in effect, we may have the similar effect because through this presumption clause, people may easily guess what types of big techs may be caught under this presumption clause. So it will be not much different from the ex-ante designation system.
Thank you. So this is incredibly overviewed. There's just a lot that has gone on, and there's a lot that may be yet to come. I think you've all done really an absolutely wonderful job to preview a number of the issues. I want to focus on 2 sets of issues. We've seen, at least publicly, specific identification both of the chaebols and of digital platforms of areas of focus. And you've given us some hints about what that's been like in the past and where some of the legislation is. But what does it actually mean to have these as areas of focus? This is not the first time where these are industries or types of conglomerates that have been the area of focus before. 2 heads ago, we were told again, chaebols matter. We know this in this past administration, there were cases against digital platforms. When we're told that these are particular areas of interest, is there anything new here in terms of the enforcement profile, or simply that they want more tools? What are we to understand from these public statements so far? I don't know who might want to take this first. Maybe Youngjin, maybe you could just start us off. How much of this is actually new versus how much of this is just the nature of the Korean economy? These are large companies, and these will always be large companies.
Yeah, I think that John has been silent so far after a great intro. So, I may defer to John about more details. But my take on your question is ever since 1987, this a set of provisions regulating Korea's economic concentration. There is a sort of a mechanism through which the KFTC designate the Korea's business conglomerates, if they meet certain criteria, asset criteria, and then turnover criteria. So, if we call in Korea, chaebols, then people pretty much have a good understanding of which company would be falling under this category. There was an attempt to increase the number of Korean business conglomerates falling under this category, or there is a less focus on reducing the list of companies subject to these regulations because of the global economy. We shouldn't just focus on the local issues and the local companies. We need to increase the competitiveness of the companies doing business globally. So there's a constant kind of the debate about what is the criteria for taking certain companies under this purview. So as Session mentioned, we are familiar with a pre-designation of the companies. During this administration, there may be some discussion about what should be the correct criteria given the global economy and then competition Korean companies are facing in the global market. But on this designation, ex-ante designation of the platform companies, this is really about digital economy, the sector specific, whereas this ex-ante regulation of the Korean business conglomerate is not really sector specific. It just to focus on economic concentration in the current economy. A lot of people are talking about, as Hyuna mentioned, whether it's going to be, presumption model or ex-ante designation model. I think in practice, I don't think there is going to be much practical difference. But I do have some concern about the scope of the legislation, right? So the Hyuna, as you know, there are two types of legislations the Kim Nam-gun or the ruling party lawmakers are contemplating. That is, one is really about EUDMA, like addressing competition issues, market structure, etc. But there another line of thinking is we just focus on the fairness on the platform, right? So there's also another piece of legislation that is pending, that is Online Platform Fairness Act. It's really try to make sure that online sellers, which are considered to be in a weaker economic position, should be protected. So we have two pieces of legislations. But for Cecil and then Hyuna and then Danny said, there is some debate about whether or not we need to expedite the process of promulgating Korea DMA, which is focusing on competition issues, because of the potential concern raised by the United States. United States raised concerns. I watched the USDL's nominee during Senate confirmation hearing. He actually was, expressed his concern about some piece of legislations on the online platform. So right now we are in full swing in negotiating reciprocal tariffs with the United States. So, even the ruling party lawmakers, they are thinking about what would be the best timing for them to push it through. But when it comes to online fairness act, I think this is not something that the United States would be terribly interested in. So this piece of legislation will be marching on because, as you all know, during President Lee's presidential campaign and his platform, he make it very clear. He spell out is a legislative objective, that is to legislate online platform bill during his administration. I'll stop here.
So, John, let me push on you. We're getting to a point. I'll just then move on to the rest of you, maybe on a different question. But John, any thoughts on this? Why the specific mention? Is this when you started, you gave us a series of comments of like, yeah, this is important, but in a sense, is there anything really distinctive and new here?
I think there is both, right? I think from the sort of the Korean politics perspective, right? Chaebol regulation is an important issue for the politics because it affects everyone's life in Korea, sometimes in a day-to-day, on a daily basis, right? So I think in every election, there is always some pledge. If you look at the pledge books of these presidential candidates, everyone would have these similar statements with respect to chaebol regulation. But having said that, I think there is some special consideration for the current administration, the current President Lee, right? If you go back to his sort of career and you look at his period as the governor of the Gyeonggi province, right? He had actually signed an MOU with the KFTC on enforcing certain fairness issues at the Gyeonggi province. He actually set up a sort of I think it was either a desk or an office related to fair competition in Gyeonggi province. And he signed an MOU with the KFTC. So he definitely has some interest in utilizing the KFTC to enforce some of his agendas. Number two, he's also known for being extremely effective in enforcing certain of his authorities, right? He came to this popularity largely because of two major sort of achievements, which is he cleared out sort of these illegal sort of shops in the sort of the riverbanks that used to charge people for use of that, basically public land. And sort of during this sort of effective enforcement during the COVID, right? So I think if you put these two together, there's going to be a specific area of chaebol regulation, which is going to be fairly effective during his administration. And I think those will largely focus on specific issues that he's addressed, which is, I think he's going to look at illicit gains by the controlling shareholders, right? It's also going to look at certain key, the concerns for unfairness between the large chaebol companies and subcontractors, like taking, the technology of the small, medium-sized companies, subcontractors, by the chaebols. But I think if you look at his other agenda, right, he's talking about the growth, and he's actually called himself a moderate conservative during the campaign, right? So I don't think the enforcement is going to increase to a large area of like overall, extensive regulation over chaebol to stifle the sort of the economic growth. So I think there's going to be some restraint here. I think on the DMA, I think Youngjin is absolutely right. Hyuna is absolutely right. Everyone's absolutely right. I think the post-designation or pre-designation, the post-presumption, right, versus pre-designation, I don't think that will have a significant impact on how the law is enforced. Just to put this in perspective, even in the previous administration, right, the KFTC amendment to the MAFTA for this law, right, this is something similar to Online Platform Act, was largely driven by the previous president as well. It was one of the issues that was discussed with the KFTC at the cabinet level with the president. And the KFTC starts pursuing this law immediately after that discussion, right? So I think there's that sort of the previous administration that pushed for this law, albeit by amendment to the Korean law with a post-presumption legislation versus the law that was sort of being pushed by the Kim Nam-gun, who now is the ruling party, right? So I think the way it came forward, I think, is largely there is some consensus there. The concern at this point is because of the politics, right? The National Policy Committee chair, which is now controlled by the ruling opposition party, not ruling party, opposition party. Like in the other sort of parliaments, the chairperson has the control over the agenda that can be put up at the plenary sessions of these National Policy Committee. Here they actually assigned the Kim Nam-gun bill to the subcommittee 2 of the NPC, which is primarily responsible for coming up with the final proposal for the NPC. But that subcommittee is also controlled. The chair position is also controlled by the opposition party now. So I think there's going to be some hurdles, right? Obviously, I think like Hyuna said, we can go through the fast track, but I think if you look at the fast track, it takes like a year or even sometimes even longer than a year. But
maybe I can shift things a little more because there seems to be a fundamental tension. We're told that the KFTC will get more staff. Does this mean more enforcement? Or does this mean more DMA regulation, that they're basically building up staff because they know that they're going to become heavy regulators even more than they've been before? How do we understand this push for more staff for the agency?
I think, go ahead, Youngjin.
No, just the push.
You're far better at this because I think you're the only person that
not
understands the KFTC and the trade issues, right? You're expert in both.
I just like take a issue with this one. The KFTC and the ruling parties, they have a different ideas about this increased manpower for the KFTC, which was directed by the president during the cabinet meeting. From KFTC side, they want to create new bureaus. They have all sorts of fancy ideas, right? So if they're assigned more than 100, then they will planning on doing all sorts of things on their agenda for a long time. But from the ruling party's perspective, and then the kind of triggering point for the President Lee, making the comment is because right now KFTC is receiving, more than 200,000 petty frivolous complaints with all sorts of field offices. So, he pointed out the fact that, why you guys, are not able to dispose of all these cases within a short period of time. So, from ruling party's perspective, they want to really mobilize this added staff to dispose of all these, petty, frivolous, miscellaneous, cases. But in the end, I think they eventually, even the ruling party's perspective, they mentioned that, maybe we can think of creating a separate independent economic analysis bureau, creating the position of chief economist, just like in the United States and the EU. And then also from KIFT's perspective, of course, this is subject to intense discussions, especially with the other government agencies, but they're floating the idea of creating a separate independent, online platform bureau, right? So, right now, I think that we need to wait and see how all of these discussions will be settling down. Different agencies and different stakeholders have a different ideas. I'll stop here.
Hyuna, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Youngjin that we among the antitrust practitioners, it was really a good news that we may have this bureau level economic analysis team at the KFTC and the bureau level platform focused investigation team. That will be a very good news to our all the practitioners in Korea. But unfortunately, I heard that last Friday, the Presidential National Policy Planning Committee meeting, there was no mention about this increase in KFTC staff. So it will take some time and more heated discussion among not only the policy participants but also inside the KFTC as well. So we are still waiting to see. But I think what Youngjin also mentioned about this Fairness in Platform Business Act, there is a high focus on fairness issue in President Lee's election campaign, and there are antitrust policy proposal includes the very interesting concept of this collective bargaining power for the franchisees or distributors or vendors of the online platforms. So we will see a lot of amendments for this special acts focusing on these fairness issues, including subcontracting act as well. But there will be a lot of issues surrounding this collective bargaining power and the designation of negotiation groups. So there could be multiple negotiation groups among the franchisees, distributors, and the vendors. So it will be very confusing who has the lead to negotiate against the supplier or franchisors or the platforms. So, but I think these amendment to the special acts, one of the key policies for the President Lee. So people expect these special acts may pass the National Assembly ahead of this, DMA style or competition law focused amendment of the law at the National Assembly.
So we're running a little short on time, and there's you've touched on so many different issues. We've heard a little bit about mergers. We've heard a little bit about collusion. We hear about the DMA. So one thing that also strikes me is we hear about regulation. The DMA is really just now getting started. But there's a sense that somehow we need regulation, presumably because whatever's happening on the conduct side isn't sufficient. Well, what is happening on the conduct side? When I look at Korea, I think, wow, you are bringing cases against platforms. And the other question that comes with it is, so what is this? How might this, any kind of conduct case, how is this impacting Korean innovation? So give me a sense of what does conduct look like in Korea? Is it somehow, did it die? Is this why regulation is coming, regulation that really we haven't seen the overall effect? Do we think that it's somehow going to step in because there's been some kind of conduct related failure? What's going on? Sort of what's the view on conduct in this platform space? Is it dead because of a push to regulation? I don't know, Cecil, maybe you have some thoughts.
Cecil, you haven't silent for so long.
Yes, I had the mute button. Yes, I agree. I don't think it'll be quiet. For two reasons. Number one, as we discussed in Korea, they have been enforcing unfair trade practices quite extensively. So for certain types of conduct, it doesn't have to be anti-competitive, but it smells like unfair to at least one side, then maybe good enough. And no one is going to question the wisdom of that, at least here in Korea, at this time. So that's been going on. And as we discussed, there are some issues, serious issues as to whether, number one, even assuming that there is now a consensus on increased consensus on need for some sort of ex-ante regulation. How do we get there? When do we get there? And that's a different story. So there'll always be a time lag. So until and after we have that alternative or supplemental ex-ante regulation, I think the KFTC will have to continue to use whatever it has, so the current regime, and go after the types of conduct that it deems to be unfair, or well, if it's anti-competitive and unfair, that's the easier question. But if it's not necessarily anti-competitive, but looks unfair, that I think the KFTC will still go after. There are certain areas as to whether the justification or the economic justification or the allegation of anti-competitiveness hasn't really been tested out. There are some numbers, even in some rather well-known areas like self-preferencing and few others, just to name few, most favored nation, the usual topics that the regulators all over the world like to go after, and it's not clear. I think the consensus among the economists as to is it good, bad, or is it different between short-term effect and long-term effect, or that what could be a parameter. So while that debate is going on, and I have no idea when we will, or if ever, have a consensus, I think the KFTC will go after certain conduct because it looks unfair. Knowing that this is rather safe course of action, they will, everybody will feel that yes, certain companies or actors need to be punished or disciplined for taking advantage of the situation. And it may not be anti-competitive if they flex their muscles too hard and too often. They're not going to get any sympathy for getting slapped around by the government. So we will continue to have that. And I think even in the US, there's certainly more discussion on certain the conduct or conversation that sounds a bit like this unfair trade practice regime, where it may not be technically anti-competitive all the time, most of the time, but certainly will look unfair to most people most of the time, if not all the time.
Well, I think that's incredibly insightful. So we're just about out of time, so I thought maybe I could ask each of you to sort of say, prediction. What's one thing, particularly in the digital space, that we need to be particularly concerned about going forward that we should be watching? Anything in particular? John, I'll start with you.
I think it's the usual things like in the past, right? I think in the sense that there's going to be a continued debate on the DMA like legislation. I think one important aspect in Korea, not only the competition issue, but I think is also we're going to have to look at what the Koreans refer to as the chaebol relationship, the powerful and the non-powerful, the powerful party and the weaker party relationship. And I think that's going to have them, at least domestically, I think that may draw more attention in Korea than what we think globally, like the competition issues. Because even during the previous administration, if you most of the discussions at the National Assembly discussion sessions with the interested parties most of them had focused on the relationship between the powerful and the weaker, how the delivery platforms were taking too much money from these small businesses that were making food, right? So I think from the political perspective, at least domestically, that may draw greater attention from the Korean side. But obviously from the global side is the competition issues, right?
Hyuna?
Yes, I also echo John's comments. So we'll see a lot of new legislations or amendment of the existing legislation to protect small business owners and on online platforms or other types of business, including franchise or subcontracting agreement. And there was a struggle between the competition agency and the industry sector agency, in our case, Korea Communications Commission, for the in-app purchase issue. It was previously dealt by this industry sector regulator, KCC, but everybody sees the enforcement by the KCC was not sufficient. So there was one issue was included in the President Lee's campaign promises is to amend the competition law to cover this issue as a competition issue. So we may expect another round of enforcement by the KFTC for this issue in the coming years as well.
Cecil?
Yes, I see that the future of antitrust enforcement in Korea looks bright. I mean it in a number of different ways. Number one, we have achieved the procedural transparency, certainly much more transparent and much more disciplined, organized in the way the system is set up and explanation given than ever before. Sure, in any system, there will be still some shortcomings, but overall, we have seen a lot of improvements and more sensible ones. In the merger case recently, to really give them credit, now they got rid of this fiction they had for a long time that the investigating staff do not negotiate fixes with the parties. Okay, maybe technically no, but we need to discuss it. Like, what's the problem? How do we solve it? Would that solve it if we just divest one plan, two plans, or what? So you gotta have the conversation. Now they have formally adopted the system where the parties can come in and offer and discuss potential fixes. In fact, Youngjin and I think we are still doing the one that's the first ever case under that new regime. And I think our experience is that it's actually good. It's all positive. Sure, there's some room for improvement, but certainly much better. As number three, finally, there will be more investigation, a list investigation. I'm not saying that what had happened afterwards, but to live up to its reputation as a more liberal, progressive, left-wing, whichever label you want to use, but in the name of protecting, which sometimes true, sometimes not necessarily true, the small businesses, especially focus on small and medium businesses and consumers. There will be more investigations, at least to say that they are looking at it more carefully than the previous administration, because I think initially they'll want to distinguish themselves as more of a common folks government. So we go after certain conduct, they may hurt them. There could be more of those investigations, especially with the talk of increasing the manpower. I don't know exactly how, but there's every agency organization, when given that opportunity, like to say, yes, we need X number of this, we need more money, and not all of that will be adopted, but it looks like there's a rare opportunity where they could actually have a meaningful increase in its manpower, whether it be mostly investigative unit or the policy planning, but you need people on both sides. So we do think there will be more investigation. The procedural transparency has improved, so it's looking better. And I said that we have a bright future.
Youngjin, I'll let you close us out. quick thought on what we should be looking out for.
Yes, I echoed, John, Hyuna, and Cecil had to say about the predictions. So rather than adding another mundane prediction of my own, I'll read President Lee's inauguration speech about the topic we talked about. He said, quote, "This old growth strategy has reached its limits, as inequality and polarization have begun to hinder further progress. To ensure sustainable growth, we must fundamentally shift our development strategy. It's time to move toward balanced development, fair growth, and just society." Thank you.
Amazing. Thank everybody for listening, and thank you very much to our wonderful group of esteemed practitioners who really have provided tremendous nuanced insight into all these issues in Korean competition policy developments. Thank you all very much.